Edgar Chase IV. Board Member Andronika Morris.
Present.
Board Member Hunter Thomas. And a quorum is not currently present.
All right, well, thank you, board members. Of course, today is a makeup day, partially a makeup day for us. We were scheduled to have our annual retreat in October, as we always do, but it was happening at the same time as Hurricane Zeta. So our schedule has been shuffled a bit. Today is the day of our normal November board meeting, so we'll do a mix of normal board meeting more normal board meeting activities, but also try to capture some of the agenda from October's retreat, because it was very important information that we want to convey to the board, and we want to make sure you get a chance to understand it before we move forward. So for the last few retreats, we've had Ms. Michelle Thomas come in and moderate those retreats for us. She's here again with us this year. And we have an agenda that we're going to take you through, beginning with discussing our strategic plan, talking a little bit about the process of how we got to this point, why we are going into a longer term plan at this moment. And then also we have a presentation from the staff, presentation from our consultants, and some other information to share with the board in advance of us moving forward with communicating our strategic plan to the community, as well as putting it into action in the form of a budget and annual business plan. So unless we have any pressing questions, I'll turn it over to Michelle so that she can lead us through the agenda for today and help us gather feedback from the board. The ultimate point of today is to gather feedback from the board so the community can let the community hear what's going on with our thought process, and for you to give us anything that we need to make an adjustment on before we finalize these plans. So Michelle, it's on you. Thank you. You're on mute, Michelle. You're on mute.
Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. Since June, the staff at Finance New Orleans has been working very diligently to put together a 10-year plan. The reason that 10 years was chosen is because over the past 3 years, we've really focused on repositioning the agency and responding or preparing to respond to what's happening in the marketplace. And certainly 2020 has presented its own unique set of challenges in the marketplace, but the past 3 years have been really internal and organizational, understanding how to create new products that met market needs in the ways that the existing products did not, and looking towards envisioning what Finance New Orleans will be for the city and the local community into the future. And so those conversations have culminated in a few slides that we're going to share with you today and get your feedback on. And then we'll do deeper dives. We have begun doing deeper dives into more specific goals and objectives that will be shared with you, I think, during your budget season. Is that right, Damon? Yes. Okay, so without further ado, we'll dive into the PowerPoint, and I'm turning it back over to you, Damon. You're on mute. You're on mute, Damon.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we've been going through this process for quite some time. You know, even upon my arrival, before my arrival at Finance New Orleans, the board has been going through strategic planning and trying to understand what direction this organization should move in and what it should be to the city of New Orleans. And we've had many iterations up to this point, but as Michelle mentioned, in this post-COVID environment, we think it's best to start fresh and develop a plan that's necessary based on this world that we're living in today, because it is different. Although we're only, a few months removed from that event happening, we're still going through it, and the differences are still being developed. So the world that we're moving into, we don't quite have all of the answers just yet, but we want to position ourselves so that we can be successful. So I'm going to share my screen so that we can go through a presentation from myself, Byron, and Bianca, which represents the executive team of Finance New Orleans. And we're going to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we've done this year and the vision for moving ahead, and get into the specifics of how these programs will look. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So first off, some milestones for 2020. If you recall, a year ago in December of 19, we were awarded 2 grants, one from C40 Cities for technical assistance and another from the Mississippi River Towns and Cities Initiative. We received a grant to study the issuance of environmental impact bonds. And we'll give you an update a little later on the progress that we've made. But this has been a great launching off point for us. It happened pre-COVID, of course, but it gave us the momentum we needed to start the year off and begin to create the type of initiatives and the type of energy that this organization will need to reach its goals. And of course, COVID happened. You can call it at the beginning of the year, and the shutdowns really began in February and March, right after Mardi Gras for us. But we tried to be responsive in that time frame, and we created the Community Support Fund, led by Bianca Brown, our COO. The team moved really quickly to try to create a new program that would provide some type of benefit and relief to the community. So that program is still active. We have more capital remaining in that fund, which we plan to continue deploying. And also, we've been working to figure out how this community support mechanism can become something that's long-term for the agency, and something that the community can depend on. In May, we were able to close the Affordable Housing CEA with the City of New Orleans and LHC. That's the CEA that's been in the works for some years. And the thought process of consolidating affordable housing tools has been in the process for many, many more years. And as as many of you know, Finance New Orleans has had these powers for a while, but we had never had the coordination necessary in order to fully take advantage of some of the powers, such as property tax exemptions and the ability to offer tax exempt bonds for affordable housing projects. So this cooperative endeavor agreement with the city and the state gives us the ability and empowers us to operate on the city's behalf to stimulate the development of more multifamily housing. And we've been able to get final approval, as you've done in September, get final approval to our first 2 projects from that Sustainable Developer Program. Those projects have not closed yet. We expect them to close by the end of the year. And that represents the first significant revenue for Finance New Orleans in some years. And not only is it transactional revenue, but it's ongoing revenue. These pilot contracts are for 40 years, and our pilot portfolio is at 0 right now, essentially, but we expect it to grow substantially over time. And as that pilot portfolio grows, our ability to generate revenue that can be reinvested into operations or to other programs, it also grows. So this is the start for us, but it is that revenue generation that we've been looking for some time. And then lastly, we were recently accepted into the American Green Bank Consortium. And the American Green Bank Consortium is a group that includes 15 or now 16 other green banks from across the country. And these green banks are in their infancy. We've talked about it before at this board, but green banks are the new finance authority. They are modern age finance authorities. They have the same powers. We, as the city's finance authority, are also operating as the city's green bank. Of course, a few years ago, the city of New Orleans was contemplating a creation of a new entity, a green bank. But in conversations with Finance New Orleans, they realized that we could serve in that capacity, that we have those powers, and that we can hit the ground running. And so that's what we've done. And because of the work that we've done up to this point, and because of the transition, some of the action items we've taken to make the transition, we've been accepted into this group, which includes the other green banks across the country. So to put it into context, there are hundreds of finance authorities. Victor, financial advisor, is on the phone. He may have an idea of how many exact finance authorities there are across the country at this moment. But in my estimation, there are a few hundred at least. And right now, there are only 16 or 17 green banks across the country. So that number of green banks is going to grow exponentially over the years, especially as we've seen the White House change over the last few weeks. The expectation is that the public policy around where public dollars are spent and what type of infrastructure that public money is spent on will change, and it will change in the direction of climate resilience, environmental protection, green technologies, green job creation. These are the types of things that the federal government is positioning itself to invest in. So these agencies, these state level and local agencies like ours around the country, are also positioning ourselves. So that's been a benefit to us being a part of that group. We've been given access to a lot of information, a lot of peer-to-peer sharing and resources, and some potential fundraising, as we'll talk about later on. So moving on, now we'll talk about the vision for resilient New Orleans, and I'll pass it over to Byron. I'm sorry, I'm passing it over to Byron a little too soon. I got a few more slides. As we talked about a few moments ago, we wanted to create a vision, a long-term vision that represents who we are, everything that we've talked about. When I stepped into the organization 4.5 years ago, the first thing the board said was, you wanted to see Finance New Orleans become more holistic. You wanted to see us provide a greater impact. So we needed to figure out what direction we should move in. And that direction, as we discovered, is to focus on creating resiliency in New Orleans. And that has many benefits outside of the economic benefits, but it has everything to do with our quality of life. So we've created a new vision statement to create a resilient New Orleans with opportunity for all. Last year, at the end of last year, you adopted a new mission statement, or an updated mission statement, and that's still the same. It reads, to improve the quality of life in the city of New Orleans by investing in affordable housing, economic development, and climate resilience projects that produce quality jobs and wealth for residents. We've also developed a set of core values that are meant to bring the mission statement to life. And those 5 core values are built on the foundation that has already been set by Finance New Orleans in its 40 years of history. But we're just thinking about how we need to behave in the future in order to meet our goals, in order to be our best. So we've come up with these 5 core values: dedication to the community, strong ethics and integrity, collaboration, equity, and professional and effective service and efficient service. This is all based on community. Community comes first. We talk about it every week during our meetings. We build it into our application process. It's all a part of what we are and who we do. And not only are we about the community, but we're going to make sure that our ethics are strong in the way that we deal with the community. And we already have a good history of meeting our ethical goals, being transparent with the community, being available with the community, and making sure that the lines of communication are always open. So we want to continue that tradition. Collaboration is something that has been beneficial to us over the last couple of years. You heard us talk about the CEA. We're going to do more of those types of things with other agencies like the city, like the state, and even private organizations. We think that collaboration is the key to reaching these big goals that we're setting. And the only way we're going to do it is by being flexible with both the public and the private side of the equation. So we expect to see more CEAs coming our way. Equity, opportunity for all. It's in our vision statement. We want everybody to have an opportunity to participate, whether it's from a business side or a homeowner. We're going to use these tools, this platform, in order to provide opportunity for everyone, particularly those individuals that have had a hard time accessing opportunity in some of our previous economies. Professional and efficient service. And this is also, again, based in and rooted in being there for the community, being professional, being responsive, being courteous, and just being genuine when we speak with the community. So we're going to continue to do that. We've had a good fire drill this year in terms of having to convert from an online world to, an offline world to an online world. And in that online world, the communication rules are different, and we're doing the adapting that's necessary. But professional service is a part of who we are. And we're going to continue to build and invest in our people to make sure that we can put our best face to the community. So now I'll turn it over to Byron so he can talk about our strategic vision goals and some of the core services and the details of how we're going to accomplish these goals over the next 10 years.
Great, thanks, Damon, and good afternoon, everyone. So these are the 10 strategic vision goals that get to the action that we want to take over the next 10 years. There's 4 goals. There'll be some subcategories or sub goals here, but ultimately these are the main goals that we'll be focused on. The first is to use climate resilience to physically transform New Orleans. This means offering green mortgages to homeowners, offering products for green buildings, for municipal buildings, for commercial buildings, and making sure that they're transformed so they can better deal with these climate events that we know will occur. And so that's just a part of what we deal with here in the city. The second goal is create economic opportunities through our programs, especially the Green Mortgage Program. We'll need green contractors, we'll need solar panel installers, we'll need fortified roofing companies, we'll need permeable pavement installers. And so we'll need all these individuals and these companies to be able to put these programs and technologies together. And this will help drive or create economic opportunities in the community. So it'll be up to us to make sure we're establishing these programs and it's available for everyone. As Damon mentioned, it's equitable. Then we have the build public wealth for community reinvestment. This ideally, with our community support fund, that is evidence of what we have been able to do in terms of utilizing our funds to invest back into the community. And so that's one example, and we want to be able to make sure we're doing that going forward as well. Next, grow as an agile and innovative organization. Ideally, we want to make sure that we are working on the same accord. We want to make sure that we're leveraging technology, and want to make sure that we provide some sort of standard operating procedures. That way we can move agile and nimble moving forward. All right, Damon, next slide, please. All right, so these are our 3 core areas of service and areas of sustainable financing programs that we will look to help support the city's climate resilience strategy and also help us, for future climate events. The first is housing innovation. So this service will look to finance affordable and resilient housing that advances some sort of innovation or reduces energy burden for low and moderate income families. So it'll also look to invest in some sort of innovative or green technologies for the city. The second core service is green buildings. This involves making an investment in commercial and public buildings through its design, its construction, its operation, just overall life cycle that eliminates any negative impacts or creates some sort of positive impact on our climate environment. This service will also look to create small business resiliency And so we'll be looking to develop financing products that's targeted toward the restaurant and the hospitality industry, which are all lifelines of our economy here in the city. And then the third service, a core service, is green infrastructure. And so this involves financing any sort of water management or anything that helps absorb or delay or mitigate flooding or absorb any type of heat or reduce any energy or emissions in the economy, in the environment. Next slide. So this shows a high level process flow of this new business model. Ideally, we know that public capital alone cannot meet the city's resilient needs. So we need to partner with capital providers to make sure we match the capital supply with overall demand. So ideally, we're looking to capitalize a fund. It could be of many different sequences of structures, but ideally, this fund will be capitalized by a couple of different sources, which can be an upfront infusion of public money. It could be some form of capital over time or from some dedicated stream of income, such as like our pilot revenue. It could be a bond issuance. And there's several other options that we're still exploring in our research and development. But ideally, working alongside with these capital providers and leveraging these dollars, these funds will support our various property sectors, our single family, our multifamily, our green buildings, and our infrastructure. And we'll leverage that by utilizing our tools such as our green mortgages, our pre-development loans, our tax exemptions, green infrastructure loans, or renewable energy loans. Next slide. So these are some of the technologies that that we will ultimately deploy on the ground to help increase the resiliency and innovation. One is energy efficiency retrofitting. This involves the modification of existing commercial buildings that may improve energy efficiency or decrease energy demand. Hurricane resistant roofing. This could be in a form of metal roofing. That's generally considered a good option for hurricane resistance, and there's several other options out there. Permeable pavement. This helps reestablish a more natural balance and reduce runoff volume of water. And then there's solar energy production storage. This ideally is a technology that can capture electricity and then store it in some other form of energy and then release it when it's needed. And then finally, rain barrels and gardens, which essentially captures water from the roof and hold it for later use. And you can use it on lawns, gardens, or indoor plants as well. Next slide. So these are the outcomes that are set out to achieve, our impact, our targeted impacts. One is affordable and sustainable housing production, green job creation, stormwater mitigation, community awareness and action, green technology deployment, and a reduction in CO2 emissions. Next slide. So ultimately, we're targeting a $1 billion investment into the community to fund these green initiatives and programs over the next 10 years. This will allow us to stimulate the development of this new green industry, built around solving our resilient challenges and issues here in the city. And ultimately, we want to make sure we make New Orleans a better home for the future and for generations to come. So now I'll turn it over to Ms. Brown, who will talk to you about our green mortgage program.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. How y'all doing?
Great. Good afternoon, Bianca.
Hey, so building a resilient New Orleans single-family green mortgage program. So you may ask yourself, what is a green mortgage? Basically, Finance New Orleans Green Mortgage is a home loan that allows both first-time home buyers and existing homeowners to finance the cost of resiliency upgrades and receive down payment assistance through a first and second mortgage package. Uh, as you know, we've been working on this green mortgage program for quite a while now. Right now, we're in the final stages of working with the contractors, working with the trade allies, everybody that's going to currently be involved. We're just closing it out, and we still expect it to be launching this year on time. How can green mortgage funding be used? Basically, the funding from the green mortgage can be used for acquisition costs, down payment and closing costs, resiliency upgrades such as energy retrofits, which basically includes installation, appliances, solar panels, wind retrofits, which basically includes your roof and window replacements, stormwater retrofits, which includes your rain barrels, water retention, and gardens. Also for minor home improvements as well. What properties currently qualify? Basically, a borrower can earn less than 140% AMI and below. The property has to be located in Orleans Parish. It has to be considered a move-in ready home. Uh, it can be an existing home. So this is something new. Previously in the past, you couldn't be an existing homeowner. This program qualifies existing homeowners as well. It can be new construction. It can be both single and duplex. So you may ask yourself, okay, how do I apply? How do I apply? How do I get started? So the application process is basically simple. You'll contact FNO for a preliminary screening. We'll kind of go through the steps, kind of get a better feel for what type of retrofit you want to make into the home. If you're buying a new home, if you're already existing, if you already own your home, then we'll kind of complete that intake process, get you set up with the HUD certified counseling agency, let you go through your 12-hour course. Once that's completed, they'll do a complete credit evaluation. Then we'll get you registered for your education courses, basically in person or online. Fifth step, counseling agents forward documentation to FANO. Once you've completed that course, we'll get that certificate basically saying, hey, you're ready for next steps. FANO will request lenders. We'll reach out to the individual, asking them to what lender that they would prefer to work with. Basically, we have a big number of lenders in our network, so we'll give them that option to make that selection. Once that's completed, we'll forward the documentation over to the lender, get them connected. Then the lender will kind of contact them, get them started, and get that pre-approval process started. Once that's done, we'll kind of move forward after that. We're getting them set up with the energy team to get them set up to conduct the assessment, and just getting getting them set up with any kind of contractors that they want to utilize, and making the program and utilizing and implementing the retrofits into the home. So you may say how a green mortgage is funded. Here's an example of a green mortgage scenario. FHA first mortgage, $194,000. You can get the FHA EEM, the 203K, which is additional mortgage product that can be leveraged along with the EEM, which is the energy efficiency mortgage. We're just renaming it the green mortgage. The FHA EEM can go up to $8,000. The 203K can go up to $32,000. Both can be leveraged. In this specific example, it gives a total of $30,222. The total first mortgage will be $224,222, and FNO DPA loan 7%, which is our DPA up to 7% option, will be $13,580, which will give you a total green mortgage package of $237,802. Green Mortgage 2030 Community Impact Goals. As it relates to 1,500 green housing units produced, 110,238,856 gallons of storm water, 28,578 metric tons of CO2 reduced, and basically going to create green job opportunities, workforce opportunities, really focus in the green area. We're going to be working with contractors, helping to produce that, to see how that can work. Really, getting people trained up for these different skill sets, especially with stormwater management, and also with solar panels, energy efficiency all around. So that's going to be green job opportunity improvements for the, as it relates. I think that does it for me, right, Damon? Slide 20 kind of ends it.
Yeah, that's it. And just so everyone knows, we're still getting an estimate on green job creation from our consultants. They haven't given us a final number yet. That's why you see a blank space there. But as Bianca said, we know that there are jobs that are going to be created along with this. So we'll get that number to you as it's developed. And then you'll learn a little bit more about the specifics of that program, a little bit more in detail. Our consultants are going to come up in the next hour to talk about the work that they've been doing to help us develop this program and develop the other programs that you see on our strategic plan, green buildings and green infrastructure. So they'll all have to go through a similar process that Bianca just described for the green mortgage program. And we started with a green mortgage because that's what we know. And that's actually something that's very unique across the country right now. So we may be an example of how to create a green mortgage. I know some other finance agencies are working on it. Some other green banks are trying to develop similar products. But this is something very unique and an example of how we can lead the pack while creating opportunity for our city. And the last part of our presentation just shows the next steps for 2021. It's a snapshot of our action plan. So Ms. Brown just mentioned that we're going to launch our green mortgage program in January of 21. We're going to start dripping out information, maybe even as early as December as it becomes available. But that is a large undertaking. So we know it's going to be a multi-year program. It's something we want to last for a long time. So we've taken our time putting it together, but it has a lot of moving parts, and we're going to get it started piece by piece starting in January. Also, the New Orleans Green Deal, we talked about the C40 grant that we received late in 2019 going into 2020. We have used that grant to develop what is called the New Orleans Green Deal. And the New Orleans Green Deal is a cooperative agreement among the city of New Orleans and all of its sub-agencies to adhere to a certain level and quality of green buildings and green infrastructure standards. So we're all coming together as city agencies to make sure we're on the same page about how we build our organizations, how we invest in infrastructure, and then also how we finance those projects. So pipeline development is a large part of this process, and the pipeline that is partly developed from this New Orleans Green Deal will help us to jumpstart our green buildings and green infrastructure practices. So other agencies are excited about this program. They're excited about having the opportunity to make investments in resiliency and sustainability, because oftentimes a lot of our agencies are strapped, and that's not just New Orleans, but that's everywhere. Agencies have to focus on what's essential and what they offer to the community. So sometimes having a renewable energy backed facility may not be a high priority, but it may be something that will be good for that agency. And we've had that conversation with many of our local public agencies up to this point. So, we expect to see some collaboration. Going back to that collaboration point, we'll collaborate and develop some solutions where you'll see possibly the school board or the airport financing the project through Finance New Orleans. We all experienced Zeta a few weeks ago, and there's infrastructure that's still impacted by it. Well, these types of investments that we're talking about are meant to be in place so that when the Zeta does happen, when a Katrina does happen, we'll be able to withstand and also bounce back very quickly. So that's the type of activity we expect to see out of the New Orleans Green Deal. In April, we're going to host our investor summit. Our first investor summit was supposed to be this year, 2020, but it was postponed due to COVID. We were able to host a teaser event, an investor webinar in October. That was successful. We had over 50 investors from around the country that took part in that call, and we've had a lot of follow-up conversations as well about our plans, the plan that we just showed you, and how much it's going to cost and where these investors can fit in. We're going to need some investors to help us with startup costs or the operating side of this. And then they're going to be some investors that are going to help us on the transactional side. So as we have projects that are coming through the different programs, we'll finance those with bonds or other types of public financing incentives. But at the end of the day, we're going to need capital in order to accomplish these goals. So that's a story that we've been telling to the market. And we'd like to get back into the muni bond market by April of 2020. So as we host that summit, that investor summit, we'll either be preparing to come out or go into the muni bond market or some sort of fundraising. So it's an opportunity for us to market ourselves, and it's not only open to us in NOLA BA, but that investor summit is open to all agencies across the city. So we expect to have participation from the members of the New Orleans Green Deal in that very same investor summit. In July 2021, we have plans to demo our first projects for the green buildings and infrastructure pipeline. I just mentioned that we're developing a pipeline with the other agencies. We've already started talking to some businesses, some restaurants around the city that are interested in this platform that we're developing. So we do have some early adopters that want to see what it's like. They want to try it out and get some projects financed with us right away. So we're going to try to get our first one out of the gate by July of 2021. And then lastly, we'd like to launch our Housing Innovation Fund by September of 2021. And that Housing Innovation Fund, if you recall, is our Pathways program repurposed. In the Pathways program, we have sold all of the properties that will not be repurposed. So the ones that will be repurposed, we're putting those out for RFP to developers. We also have some leftover capital that we plan to use for pre-development costs and providing developers with the upfront capital they need to build sustainable home ownership opportunities in the city. So we don't want to just see them build units for the sake of building units. We want these developers to push the envelope, but also be productive at the same time. So this funding is going to be for those developers that have really good ideas that need to be tested. For those developers that have concepts that they'd like to bring to New Orleans. We've already seen a few proposals from developers. We heard about a number of ideas. So we feel good about this particular program, and we think it'll spark a lot of innovation and create opportunities that can be scaled down the line. And of course, there are many other things that we're going to be working on in 2021. These are the items that stand out for now, and we've already started working on these. So it's a work in progress as always, but we're going to take this momentum from 2020, carry it into 2021, because we have a long-term vision that's going to take a really long time for us to get up and off the ground. And our consultants are going to come up in a few moments to talk about the financial implications of these programs and what the trajectory of financial impact looks like for Finance New Orleans, the community impact, how it all looks, but how it takes time to accumulate. So what are the strategies that we're going to have to put in place as an agency today in order to be ready for 5-10 years down the line? So that's it for me and the rest of the team. Michelle, pass it back over to you so that we can, I think we have a board feedback session coming up next.
Thank you, Damon. Actually, I want to, Damon, could you put the PowerPoint back up, because there are a couple of things in particular that we wanted to get feedback on, starting with the vision statement. Slide 3. To create a resilient New Orleans with opportunity for all. Would love to hear board feedback on this. I don't think we're going to be asking for any action to be taken on it, but is this aligned with what you think the vision of the agency should be? Andronika. Ms. Morris, are you there? Okay.
I'm here. Sorry. I'm trying to, I have a new phone and it was not cooperating with this. Okay.
So what are your thoughts? Does the vision statement capture what you think the vision of the agency should be?
So I think as a, one of the problems that happens sometimes with vision statements is they get to be too wordy. So I think that this is very economical my only worry is that the term resilience doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So if there was a way of talking about how, that the finance New Orleans would do that, and
I think that's captured in the mission statement, because the mission statement does it itemizes the how.
got it.
Damon, could you talk a little bit about what resilience means to you and the executive team in this vision statement?
Sure. And Andronika, to your point, it was left vague intentionally because resilience does mean different things. And it means different things to us. So certainly there's climate resilience, but there's organizational resilience. There's community resilience. It does mean a number of different things in different contexts. But for us, we know we need to be flexible and be able to address resiliency in multiple categories. So it was left open-ended for that reason.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm not suggesting that you bog it down with a whole lot more words. I just it's broad enough where I don't feel like it. I certainly don't feel like anything is being excluded by the statement. But one thing is with a opportunity for all. I mean, and again, I think that gets that as a high level, it can include equity. And I think again, the mission statements needs to talk about equity, particularly racial equity. If the vision statement can be broad and aspirational and all encompassing, and we can drill down a little bit more on some other specifics in other places, I think it's good.
Giselle?
No, I agree. The vision statement should be broad, and I agree with the ability with this statement to be able to overlay resilient amongst different aspects of the organization, our breadth of work. And so I think it's fine. Let's see how it ties into the mission statement, because they do both go together. So let's see how it's outlined there and if it truly states the vision.
Can you move forward the next slide?
Okay. Yeah.
You all tinker with this one every year.
We sure do. I want us to be able to just give us a one that we don't have to keep going back.
Yeah, I think we're good. I don't think anything in the goals and objectives has necessarily changed that would impact needing to alter the mission.
Yeah, no, I think this is good. Quality of life, economic, climate resilience projects.
Yep.
I'm good with both. Yep.
Okay. Can we go to slide 6? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm looking at a different slide deck. Not that one. Keep going. One more. There we go. The core service areas. So as we talked about all of the things that the Finance New Orleans does or can do or should do in order to generate, in order to achieve the mission and the vision, we were able to narrow the broad range of programs that we have been discussing into these 3 core service areas: housing innovation, green buildings, and green infrastructure. Are there other, is this too broad? Is it too narrow? Is it just right? Are there other types of service areas that you think should be contemplated? Because essentially everything for the next 10 years will fall into one of these 3 buckets.
This is good. That I don't know that we need to add anything to it, but there's one consideration. I feel like it's not really capturing our financing ability. And I know it does, like within these buckets, but as a visual, what does it really say? Because housing innovation, yes, I mean innovation around different mixes of funding and, financing is one thing, but it can mean a lot of things. It's almost like the resilient piece, right? It can mean a lot of different things. And so I want to make sure that we're not losing the financing component of who we are.
And when we get into the detail, so for example, actually the very next slide, everything is about financing.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get to the more granular level of program goals and objectives, all of the tools are financing tools.
Okay.
And so do you think maybe we could do a sentence that explains that that Finance New Orleans exists to create funding mechanisms to invest in these core service areas? Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. Like, it doesn't have to be that, exact word, but something like that. That's what I'm kind of getting at.
Okay.
That's what we do, right? We invest and we create financing mechanisms to carry out this work. But I think it's fine. This is an internal document, right? This is not an outward facing document. And so I think it's okay, but I want to make sure that in our outward facing documents, we always, communicate that what you just said, Michelle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there are two more that I wanted to, the target community outcome slide. Are there any additional outcomes that staff should be working towards? Mr. Smith, are you back?
I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had stepped away.
No.
Are there any additional outcomes that you think the staff should focus on?
For me, I think that the most important thing is the sustainability aspect as well as affordability. Affordability being number one, because we do understand I'm hoping that we're all on the page of understanding the need for housing in this community, for affordable housing in the community. Sustainability is great, and I love the idea of sustainability. But it has to be affordable at the same time. So, my thoughts for the staff is that we need to make sure that affordability, maintains a staple of our business plan, so to speak, and that we incorporate sustainability, but making sure that we have the affordability as the benchmark.
Hunter or Duke, do you all think that there should be any additional target outcomes from the work that the Finance New Orleans will do over the next 10 years?
Hey, this is Doug. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I think the slide that I'm looking at really captures at least my vision, and I think our vision for the next 10 years. Sure, 10 years is a long-term approach, and something may come at us a little differently in year 5 or 6, but I'll echo what Mr. Smith was saying, is really digging deep on one of the main or priority issues that we're looking or facing in the city, is that affordable and sustainable housing production. And I think the next one coming behind that would be the job creations that'll help with that initial priority as well. So the slide that we're looking at, I'm pretty good with it, with each one of these groups.
Okay, thank you. Hunter?
I agree. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I agree. It seems to be pretty comprehensive. From my understanding of affordable, sustainable housing, that also includes the quality. So if quality included in that definition, with all the other points that are made and areas that we believe that we should be tackling, I'm in agreement.
Awesome. Are there any of these that you think should be removed or that should not be a priority?
Is that a statement for me or in general?
For all of you.
I think they all kind of align and almost work hand in hand as you go away from the green job, stormwater, green technology reduction. If we do step 2 right, you're already implementing 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I think they're good, or in some capacity.
Okay. And then whoever's doing the PowerPoint, if we could go to the Green Mortgage 2030 Community Impact Goals. Byron or Bianca, could you explain to the board how you came up with these numbers?
The numbers for the
target, the impact, community impact goals for the Green Mortgage Program.
Yeah, so overall that 1,500 number we have been utilizing. And Byron, help me if I'm mistakenly, but these numbers were numbers you all were using in the model, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the numbers are in working with Quantified Ventures and assessing the impact of generating 1,500 green housing units. Quantified Ventures help us get to the stormwater numbers and the metric ton numbers. Based on that we supplied the actual unit numbers and they provided us with the gallons of stormwater and metric tons. And as Damon mentioned, we're still flushing out the green job opportunities number.
Okay, I'm sorry, that was for the units produced? Byron?
Yes.
Okay, and the stormwater?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I apologize if I missed it. Did you explain how we got to the 110 million?
That number is based on the 1,500 number of units produced.
Okay.
That number as well as the metric ton numbers.
Okay, and so what are those assumptions? If you've got a green unit that's going to produce X amount of mitigated stormwater. Oh, hi, Laura. Yes, that would be awesome. Could you explain the assumptions behind these goals?
Hi there. It looks like you all can see me now. I was having trouble getting onto video. But Byron, I don't want to jump in. Did you have more to add, or do you want us to jump in and help explain what we did in the model?
No, go right ahead, Laura. Thanks.
Sure. So some of the assumptions we used there, we worked with Green Man Dan, who's been doing these green infrastructure installations with Nora, to think and thought about what were some of the most popular practices. So these assumptions are based on first on what has worked through the Nora program, what has been popular through the Nora program, and calculated how many gallons of stormwater were captured each year through one of those practices. And then we made some assumptions around how many of those 1,500 units would use each of those practices. So for example, we did not assume that everyone would install a rain garden or everyone would, place a holding tank with permeable pavement on top over their driveway. So I can look up some more specific model numbers if folks want to understand that better. But the assumptions reflect a mix of adoption of practices ranging from just a simple rain barrel attached to a property to, someone, for example, replacing their driveway with permeable pavement and a larger tank that can store more stormwater. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Are there any questions, board members, about these goals? And again, this is just for one program, right, Bianca?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then finally, the 2021 action plan overview, which is a pretty aggressive schedule. I know that staff has already begun working on most of this, if not all of it. Are there any questions from the board or any feedback from the board on kind of the starting point at reaching the 2030 goals? Okay, I think that's a blessing, huh? I think everybody's saying, great job, Damon.
Yeah, we'll take it as such.
Okay, I guess now we'll turn it over to the Green Infrastructure Fund and Single Family Green Mortgage Program.
Well, that's a good segue into the conversation we were just having. We're going to turn it over to Quantified Ventures at this point, but I just wanted to give the board a little background on what Quantified Ventures has been doing with us. Quantified Ventures presented to you at our last board retreat and talked about some of their services. We hadn't quite won that grant yet, but we were awarded that grant by the end of the year, and we started working with the Quantified Ventures team at the beginning of the year. Victor Chang, and actually Victor's next.
I'm sorry,
Michelle, but it's okay because they've both been working with us hand in hand. So Victor Chang, who's our financial advisor, our traditional financial advisor, he's also been helping us not only with our basic housing finance agency needs, but he's also been helping us with this transition into this green finance agency. And where we started, was evaluating this green mortgage program. But in order to do this green mortgage program effectively, we knew we had to dig in deeper to the assumptions, and Quantified Ventures specializes in developing outcome-based financing solutions. So the idea initially was to issue some sort of environmental impact bond that would help finance a project or a program. We even considered financing the entire system or our new organizational model. All of those different options are still on the table. But before we could really move this thing forward, we needed to take a step back and truly understand what an investment in a green mortgage looks like, what kind of impact it provides, and then we'll use that same model to build out the other areas of our programming, the green buildings and the green infrastructure. But we decided to start where we are and start with what we know. So what we're going to do now is Victor Chang with Kane Mitter. He's going to provide you with an update of what's going on in the bond market and just other pertinent details about his work with us. And then after Victor goes, you'll hear from Quantified Ventures, who's been specialized work that I just mentioned. But both of those financial advisors have been working with us cooperatively. That goes to show you how big of a plan this is. Normally you got one financial advisor, well, we got two, and they're working in separate capacities. So it's been a big help for us. We've had a lot of momentum generated from being in the same room with these advisors, and our bond counsel and other advisors have been involved in this to help us out. We have weekly meetings. Sometimes more than once a week, we'll meet to talk about these issues. so that we can get answers in order to launch these programs into the community. So I'll turn it over to Victor. And then once Victor goes, we can jump right into Quantified Ventures, and we can take questions from the board together, Michelle, because we're running a little short or running a little behind time.
Thanks, Damon. I'd like to share my screen.
Okay, let me stop sharing mine.
Okay.
You should be able to go now.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great. So good to speak with you all again. As Damon said, I'm just gonna provide an update of the bond and mortgage markets since we last spoke, which was last October. Since then, COVID-19 has affected all of our lives, and as we'll discuss on this update, it's left its mark on the financial markets as well. So if you recall from last year's presentation, we showed you the chart on the top, which graphs the yield on the 10-year US Treasury in dark green and the Fed funds rate, which is an overnight or one-day interest rate. So the closer the two lines, the flatter the yield curve. And the further apart they are, the steeper. So in general, high interest rates and a flat yield curve, that's a favorable environment for municipal housing bonds. And that's where we were before the financial crisis in 2008. With both long and short-term rates above 4%. Then, from 2008 through 2015, the yield curve was really steep with a large spread between the two lines. Then beginning in 2016, as the Fed began increasing the Fed funds rate, the yield curve began to flatten and the environment for municipal housing bonds continued to improve and actually looked really well, really, really good. But then COVID happened. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So then COVID happened, and you can see that it really affected the bond markets. Both the yield on both the 10-year and the Fed funds rates plummeted, and the yield curve is now steeper and interest rates are lower. The bottom chart shows the same phenomenon, but in the tax-exempt bond market. The dark blue line is the yield on 10-year MMD, which is the municipal market data index of highly rated municipal bonds with a 10-year maturity. And the light blue line is SIFMA, which is another municipal bond index that tracks highly rated municipal bonds with 7-day rates. But and again, same phenomenon. So in spite of the steeper yield curve, the mortgage revenue bond, or the MRB market, is still strong in terms of absolute rates. These three lines represent different ways a housing issuer could issue bonds and their borrowing costs over the past year. So pre-pandemic yields for an all fixed rate traditional MRB or mortgage revenue bond, which is dark blue, bottomed out in the low to mid 180s. Then the market went haywire for about 2 weeks where there were no publicly offered bond issues. And then after a pretty rocky April, the market began to stabilize in May, and by August, we were seeing record all-time low traditional MRB yields. So as of last week, the traditional all fixed rate deal yielded around a 181. So this is, good news in terms of absolute rates, but, MRBs haven't had the Fed's support in terms of asset purchases. And so while we're doing well in terms of absolute rate, MRBs have drastically underperformed the comeback in the US Treasury market, the mortgage-backed security market, and corporate bonds. So the relative attractiveness isn't there, but hopefully it will eventually come back. So you can see here how the Fed support has affected TBA prices, which are basically prices for new mortgage-backed securities, and it's an indication of the mortgage market. So TBA is the other way HFAs can finance mortgages, and is basically how FNO is currently financing mortgages, and it's how we would anticipate FNO to finance its green mortgages going forward until the bond market comes back. So this chart shows Ginnie Mae mortgage-backed security pricing since the beginning of October 2019. and it shows a pretty dramatic increase in pricing. So back in February, if we just focus on like the middle line here, Ginnie Mae 3% MBSs had a price of a 102.6. Then after the Fed began aggressively purchasing MBSs in the secondary market, TBA prices shot way up and skyrocketed. And as of last week, that same Ginnie Mae is now worth a 104.4. So an increase of almost 2 percentage points in price. So this slide compares the borrowing costs in the MRB market against the private sector because prices have an inverse relationship with rates and yields. This is somewhat of a translation of the TBA pricing from the last slide. So in the top chart, the borrowing cost for MRBs is in light gray, and the borrowing cost in the private sector is represented by the black line, which is the Freddie Mac mortgage rate. And the bottom chart shows the difference between the two lines. So the greater the difference, the more attractive mortgage remedy bonds are. And you can see that pre-pandemic, that difference was close to 1%. But then post-pandemic, that relative attractiveness of MRBs has worsened, and we're now closer to 50 basis points or half a percentage point. So if we, and this slide is an update of another slide you saw last year, and it translates the cost of funds from the prior page into mortgage rates for an HFA. So the orange lines represent generic mortgage rates since the beginning of 2019 for HFA's TBA programs. And the dark lines represent generic full spread mortgage rates funded by bonds. And each one of these charts represents a different single family mortgage product. So working clockwise from the top left, a government insured loan with no down payment assistance, a conventionally insured loan with no down payment assistance, a conventionally insured loan with down payment assistance, and a government loan with down payment assistance. So as you would expect, if you look at all the black lines, the MRB mortgage rates are back to pre-pandemic, basically all-time lows, if not a little lower in some cases. But TBA mortgage rates are a point to a point and a half lower than pre-pandemic levels. So for mortgages that do not have down payment assistance, TBA products for sure achieve a much lower mortgage rate than an all fixed rate mortgage remedy bond. And then for mortgages that do have down payment assistance, the story is a little bit more nuanced. MRBs can be competitive for many programs, especially those with other balance sheet resources. But in general, issuing bonds used to result in lower mortgage rates. You can see that with the black lower than the orange, but now that relationship has reversed. So this slide has a lot going on it. I'll just, it focuses on the economics. I'll briefly go through a couple things here. To the right, each one of these lines represents a different financing execution, either from financing mortgage-backed securities in the TBA market or by issuing bonds. There are many different ways an HFA could issue bonds as represented by these lines. And the columns, each one of these columns represents a different prepayment speed. Once you finance those mortgages, how fast do those mortgages prepay or refinance or go through foreclosure and you get your proceeds back. So a mortgage at 400 PSAs pays back about 3 or 4 times faster than a mortgage at 100% PSA. The orange line shows that by financing mortgages, and the numbers here represent the present value of income to the agency in percentage points. So the orange line shows that by financing mortgages in the TBA market, an agency could earn 3 to 3.8% of present value income per mortgage they finance, depending on how fast those mortgages prepay. The brown line at the top shows that if an agency can achieve full spread in the bond market, and full spread again it's the maximum an agency can earn under federal tax law, it would earn more income than in the TBA market at prepayment speeds up to about 250%. And we would expect FNO's loans to prepay lower than 250. So if you can earn frill spread, you would earn more money by issuing bonds. But if you focus on the light blue line, which is down here, that's indicative of current bond rates and FNO's current income if it were to issue bonds. And it's kind of your traditional fixed rate bond issue. So, it's well below the orange line. However, despite TBA being more competitive currently than bonds, you can see the issuance trends here, and it's mostly continued in 2020 despite COVID-19. So the volume of single-family mortgage revenue bonds continues to grow year over year. And in 2014, only 19 states issued bonds for single-family housing for new money, and this year, 41 states have issued single-family housing bonds. And then when you're comparing the 2019 bar with the 2020 bar, the blue represents the same time frame, so January through October. So year to date, the 2020 volume is actually a little bit higher than 2019 volume, though we're not sure that the volume in this fourth quarter will be as high as last year's fourth quarter, which is in orange. Bless you.
Thank you.
So briefly on the multifamily side, these lines each represent a long-term multifamily financing cost for different types of financing executions. And similarly to the general interest rate slides and the single family rate slides, multifamily interest rates have trended downward, but rates saw a spike in March. So the absolute rates have come down to the same or lower than their levels in February. And then this slide shows some various short-term rates, 1 month LIBOR, SIFMA again, their relationships. And then we're now graphing a new line, which is purple. It's the 1 month SOFR fallback, which is a rate that may replace 1 month LIBOR once 1 month LIBOR is scheduled to discontinue, which is the end of this year. So one of the agencies that deals a lot with LIBOR and the swap markets and so on released the formula for this 1 month SOFR fallback. But anyway, so you can see, in general, and actually LIBOR is going back to the end of next year, sorry. You can see that interest rates were trended downward. They kind of spiked, and then and now they're very close to zero. And then this final slide shows the various investment rates that are indicative of what an agency can typically invest in. So just, vanilla US Treasuries and non-callable agencies like Fannie Mae Securities, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae's, and FHLBs, stuff like that, along with investment agreements. The main takeaway here is that investment rates are quite low. If you look at the maturity of the investments here, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you're 25 basis points or below all the way through, 3 years, unless you're entering into an investment agreement. And going out 10-year, the 10-year US Treasury is 87 basis points as of last week. And, it's tough out there in terms of investment rates. So that was the brief market update. Happy to go over any of this or answer any questions either now or if you've had time to look at it and you want to follow up with any questions.
Yeah, Victor, thank you. I think it's best for us to go to Quantified Ventures so we can have a holistic conversation about financing opportunities. So if the Quantified Ventures team is still there, the floor is yours for you to do your presentation.
Great, thanks, Damon. Hey everybody, I'm Matt Carney from QV. I'm a senior associate here on the environment team. I'm also joined by Laura, who spoke earlier, and Ben Cohen, who's the director, or I guess he's joining shortly. I think he's in another call, but he's the director of our urban and coastal resilience practice. So hopefully he's able to join as well. I will follow Victor's lead and share my screen as well. One second. There we go. All right. Can everybody see? Can everybody see this the slide that I have up now?
Yes.
Matt,
Great.
I can see it in like in PowerPoint. I'm not seeing it like
Mhm.
in the presentation mode.
All right. Let me try. Oh. How's that?
I'm seeing presenter notes, not full screen.
Why is this? Oh my God, this is very frustrating. I'm sorry. Hold on one second.
Even being remote for however many months now, we're all still figuring out tech issues.
Still a little fried. Okay, here we go. Millionth time is the charm. All right. How about now? Is that the title slide?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Great. All right. All right. So thanks everybody. I'm glad we're able to have a chance to kind of walk through these slides today. I know, this is we're kind of excited to talk through the work we've been doing, and just get everybody up to speed on what we've been doing with FNO, and get into a real deep dive. So, like Damon mentioned at the start, we're one of the financial advisors who's been working with FNO across the entire sort of green finance business model that FNO has been working on. But what we really want to focus on today is specifically the single family green mortgage program. So again, like we've heard, this program is going to be focused exclusively on folks who are seeking out a mortgage from FNO. And so let's, just a quick review of the agenda. What we'll do is, first talk just again at a high level, kind of recap what the overarching, green finance business model looks like. We can give everyone a little bit of background on who we are and what QV does. And then, the main thrust of what we are going to go through today is the deep dive specifically into the single family green mortgage program. I'd also say, we want this to be interactive, as much as possible. So, I'll try and pause repeatedly if folks have questions. Feel free to interject, raise your hand, whatever is easiest. You don't necessarily have to save them all for the end. So, first, let's just talk through kind of the overall, what FNO calls that green finance business model. So, as everyone here has kind of talked about a little bit, and as Damon mentioned, what FNO is really trying to do kind of moving forward is move beyond its traditional role as a housing finance agency and really work with the city of New Orleans to make the city more resilient to climate events. As climate change kind of continues to threaten the city in a lot of different ways, it's really important, not only as a housing authority, but for the city overall to think about every way, that they can kind of approach this problem and build the city to be more resilient. And this is, everything from homeowners to businesses to government agencies, et cetera. And so FNO's approach here is really focus on these 4 different things. So first is single family housing, which will be the primary focus of today's conversation, but also around, how to incentivize resilience in multifamily housing projects, in commercial buildings, and municipal and public buildings as well. So now we can give a little more background on QV and who we are. So we describe ourselves as an outcomes-based capital firm. And what that really means is we look for projects that have kind of significant health or social or environmental impacts that, for whatever reason, aren't necessarily getting financed, in the normal run of things. But we believe, have these really important external benefits that can be captured and quantified, and with a little bit of kind of creative structuring, we can kind of come in and build a financial package to really incentivize these projects to get financed, to get done. And one of the ways we do that is to look at these impacts. So for example, things like Damon was talking about earlier, like stormwater caption or carbon reduction, green jobs, et cetera. If we can kind of evaluate a project, look at those outcomes, quantify them, and put a dollar value on them, put a, really value them to folks outside of FNO, and, whether it's going to the city of New Orleans or other stakeholders who care about those outcomes, and say, look, this is, this green mortgage program is going to yield these benefits. You as a city benefit from these, or you as a state benefit from these, where, in order to make this happen, we need X, Y, Z in terms of support or in terms of upfront capital, et cetera. And then we can kind of bring in stakeholders, share the risk for these types of investments, and try and get those projects financed. So specifically for our engagement with FNO, again, as Damon mentioned earlier, it began with the Mississippi Environmental Impact Bond Challenge last year. So FNO was one of the 2 winners of that challenge that were selected. And, so over the course of 2020, QV and FNO have been working together on this project, in sort of with our work being financed through grants from the McKnight and Walton Family Foundations, kind of in support of that Impact Bond Challenge. And so, for QV, what we kind of focus on 4 primary areas in terms of the work we do. So this falls under our urban and coastal resilience practice, of which Ben is the director. So this is, really focused on cities, particularly along the coast, that face issues similar to New Orleans, whether it's floodings or storm water, et cetera. We've done a lot of work in that space. We also have a forestry and land use practice that works, that has a longstanding relationship with the the U.S. National Forest Service, as well as an agriculture practice and a health and human services practice. And really what's important to us is to also, as an organization, to be able to learn and sort of share across these different practice areas. So they're not necessarily, distinctly siloed, and we can, even for things like what we're doing here with New Orleans, that's focused on urban and coastal resilience, we can take learnings from some of these other practice areas, think about what implications for public health, for example, might be, and build that into our same project work. Now, the last little bit about us, just to give you, again, a little more of a specific sense about kind of what we're actually doing on a day-to-day basis with FNO, is a few different things. So in our role kind of as a sort of consultant and financial advisor, we're really engaged in kind of digging through the data, understanding the market, being able to come to FNO with recommendations to model out the finances and, what we think the program looks like, to engage with external stakeholders, so for example, partners who might be participating in the green mortgage program and might be responsible for actually implementing these retrofits. Part of what we do is connecting with those stakeholders, incorporating them into our planning, into the process. And then, ultimately trying to synthesize all of this information, be part of the decision-making process along with FNO, and then developing, the actual financial structure and strategy for ultimately getting this financed and getting the program off the ground. Great. So I can pause there in case there are any other questions. Otherwise, we can kind of get into the meat of the presentation, which is the focus on the green mortgage program. Great. All right. So again, like we've said, the real focus for 2020 has been preparing to launch the green mortgage program. And, really the basis for this effort is really twofold. So, in our conversations with FNO, what we've really heard kind of being these dual priorities are on one hand, you have residents in the city of New Orleans who already face barriers to home ownership. It's expensive, it's difficult. And in their traditional role, as a housing authority, FNO has an obligation to try and make home ownership more affordable, make it easier for the city's residents. At the same time, the city of New Orleans has its resilience and sustainability goals that it's trying to meet. And really trying to make the city better prepared for the future of climate change and all of the risks that come with being in the city of New Orleans. And so the goal here is to really address both of those challenges in a single way through this green mortgage program. And so what FNO is hoping to do is basically incentivize potential homeowners to adopt these resilience and energy efficiency retrofits for their homes when they're getting a mortgage through FNO. So not only is FNO trying to offer a mortgage that is attractive on its own terms, so in this case, offering up to 7% down payment assistance on their mortgage, but also trying to help homeowners kind of put that down payment assistance, as well as potentially combining it with some other grant money into resilience retrofits to make those homes more resilient, more valuable, deliver more value to the homeowners themselves. So that's been the primary focus so far. One of the things that we're also hoping to do a little bit further down the road is provide avenues for existing homeowners. So even if they're not getting a mortgage through FNO, to provide an opportunity for them to also participate in this program. So that could be something like a credit enhancement fund, where if you already have a home in New Orleans, but you're interested in these retrofits, you could borrow against this credit enhancement fund, get a lower interest rate on your loans, and make that more affordable for homeowners. So again, we're really trying to make this as broadly applicable to homeowners and prospective home buyers in the city as possible. So now we can get into a little bit of the details of what this looks like. So in terms of the scope, what FNO is hoping to do is basically issue 100 green mortgages in the first year, and then ladder that up so by year 3, they'd be issuing 150 green mortgages a year, and then kind of plateau there with a target of about 150 green mortgages per year. So ballpark, we're looking at about 1,500 green mortgages within 10 years. Within that, there are a few retrofits specifically that FNO is trying to incentivize. So that includes solar installation, energy efficiency retrofits, fortified roofing to make it more resilient to wind and storms, and then stormwater capture and diversion. So this is, the gallons of stormwater that can be diverted to kind of reduce stress on the overall system. Now, the capital needed to support this program, as we've currently estimated, is about 10.5 million. And, we're hoping to essentially capitalize that in a few different, we're looking at a few different avenues. So that could be anything from GO bonds from the city. It could be the issuance of green mortgage bonds. We're looking at selling these mortgages on the secondary market and using those mortgage-backed security fees as additional premiums on an ongoing basis. The FNO has already started working out their pilot fees, so those payment in lieu of taxes fees for some of their multifamily housing projects, and would be dedicating some of that revenue to this program as well. And then we're also exploring potential revenue sharing opportunities with some of the partners who would be participating in this program. So, ultimately the goal here is to, not only kind of meet the upfront capital need, but make sure that this program can be solvent on a year-to-year basis, and, generate profits, for FNO moving forward. So now let's talk a little bit more about what these packages actually look like. So right now, what FNO is hoping to do is offer prospective homebuyers up to 7% in down payment assistance. So that's a relatively generous amount. It would be paid back. It's like a 10-year due on sale DPA. So that money would be paid back to FNO after 10 years. That 7% limit is basically arrived at by, if the idea being about 5% of that could be financed through the premiums on selling these mortgages on the mortgage-backed securities market. About additional 2% you could get by leveraging FNO's reserves. So you kind of top out at 7%. That being said, we don't expect every homeowner to want 7% DPA. Some might want to do less. So again, based on our assumptions and the discussions we've had so far, we're anticipating about half of homeowners looking at about 4.75% DPA, with a quarter going below at around 2.5 and a quarter kind of maxing out at around 7%. So again, those are the assumptions that will undergird, a lot of the financial implications we're walking through on this call. As those change, again, that could have implications for the model as well. But, just to give some perspective on the types of assumptions that we're kind of working from right now. So if that's what the homeowner can kind of get for their down payment assistance, what can they use that for? And so the way we're trying to design this is to really maximize flexibility for homeowners to pursue precisely the type of retrofits that they want. And, rather than being overly prescriptive and specifying, which retrofits are required, et cetera, we're basically instead trying to provide a menu for them to choose from. What we try to do here is basically bucket that menu, roughly speaking, according to price. So, there are some retrofits that don't cost the homeowner anything upfront. So for example, for solar, one of our partners is or potential partners is a solar leasing company focused on lower and middle income residents in New Orleans, where they install solar at no upfront cost. And it's just paid for through the savings on their utility bills over the course of their contract. Other kind of free upfront retrofit options include energy efficiency measures. So, Entergy is another partner of ours who provides, free energy efficiency retrofits to homeowners. And then, for things like, there are also rain barrels that are like a very cheap option for like a very basic water retention strategy. Kind of in the next bucket, we have things like the fortified roof. So, getting a company to come in, they reseal your roof, put in better nails, do all of that so it can better withstand a storm. You have more in-depth water retrofits, like installing a French drain or a rain garden. That does cost a little, a few $1,000s to implement. And then you have additional energy efficiency measures that, again, can yield a significant energy savings to the homeowners, but do kind of require an upfront investment. And then lastly, we have some of the more expensive things. So for example, putting a new HVAC system is one of the most environmentally friendly retrofits that any house can do. Those cost about 10 grand, so it's not a cheap thing for homeowners to do, but it does have really important benefits. Similarly, installing permeable pavement, that reduces more more gallons of stormwater than any other intervention, but it's also relatively expensive. So again, we don't want to be overly prescriptive in terms of dictating to homeowners what they need to do, but instead kind of provide them this menu, let them choose for themselves. In order to finance this, in addition to the DPA, there's also money available from energy efficiency loans and these 203KS loans. So these are, federal loan programs where the money, is specifically goes towards supporting these energy efficiency measures. So one of the things FNO would be able to do is essentially help these homeowners apply for these funds if they were interested in getting them, and and spending beyond the DPA that they're already getting, spending some additional money on these types of retrofits. So now we can look at the profit streams of what we expect from this model. So when we think about this green mortgage program, there are really three primary revenue streams that are built into it at present. So the first one of these is the mortgage-backed security proceeds. So for every mortgage that FNO issues, that can be sold on the secondary market at a premium. And then that premium comes back into the fund as a revenue stream. And that's that little green line that you see here. Another source of revenue are these pilot fees. So again, that's those payment in lieu of taxes. So for some of these agreements that FNO has with for their larger multifamily properties, revenue from those agreements is going to be set aside for this program to help support it. And then you can see here after 10 years, this blue line emerges. So like I had mentioned earlier, these mortgages are going to be 10-year due on sale mortgages, which basically means, if they're getting 7% in down payment assistance, after 10 years, they're going to be paying that money back. And so this is where we see after those 10 years, a lot of that initial DPA assistance starts flowing back into the fund in the form of those repayments. On the flip side, of course, there are also going to be the costs associated with this program. So when we think about the DPA assistance, the FNO on an ongoing basis is probably looking to spend about $900,000 to a little less than $1.5 million per year on this DPA assistance. There are also ongoing costs of about $50,000 for marketing per year. But really, the most significant front costs for the upfront are these upfront capital expenditure costs. So this is just what it takes to get this program up and running, get it solid, and really have it be going full steam, fully launched. And right now, the expectation there is that's going to require about $2 million in investment per year for 5 years. So that's a total of $10 million. And that's really where that's the sort of the biggest chunk of the upfront capital needs kind of stems from that. We also assume that, some percentage of the GPA assistance, when it gets paid back, there'll be a certain default rate. So we account for that as well as an additional expense here.
I have a question, Matthew.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the previous slide on your revenue assumptions, who's going to be servicing the loans?
That, Damon, you probably have a better idea than me. Who is it?
That would,
US?
hey, this is Victor. Yeah, that would be US Bank, the
Okay.
same servicer as the first mortgages, even though the first mortgages won't be on FNO's balance sheet. They would service the seconds as well as the firsts.
So the revenue generated from the MBS sales historically has not come back to FNO. How is this going to change?
The revenue from the MBS sales historically has, I guess I'm not sure what you mean in terms of it hasn't come back to FNO.
I mean, like in any financial gain that has existed, and this is actually how Kane Mitter was brought to the table, because is it Raymond James? Who do you work, Damon? Who are you guys? Was it Raymond James that was selling the securities and keeping the profit?
Stiefel is George K. Baum was doing it, and then and they've been acquired by Stiefel.
Okay, so historically, unless something has changed, when the securities are sold, when the mortgages are sold, the revenue that's generated from that hasn't historically come to FNO. Are we assuming that with these new products it will?
Yeah, so there are different levers and programmatic goals that FNO can dictate to Stiefel. Whether all of the premium FNO can determine the mortgage rate, which then impacts how much revenue is generated up front. So if FNO, for example, wants to set a very low mortgage rate, there would essentially be very little premium that FNO would keep, or if FNO wanted to have a higher mortgage rate, they would generate that 5 points of premium, which would be used in part, which would be used to in the form of a down payment assistance loan to the borrower. So FNO wouldn't necessarily keep that upfront revenue. What they would earn is a second lien loan that would be on their books and would eventually come back into the Green Infrastructure Fund when that loan pays off. Or FNO could say, hey, we have the 5 points of premium that we're going to generate. We'd like to keep a certain amount, let's say 1%, and that 4 points of that premium can be used for down payment assistance. So I think these are levers that FNO can kind of tinker with as the market demands change and as FNO's financial goals change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Victor. That was much more eloquent than an answer I could have given, so I appreciate it. And thank you, Michelle. That was a really good question. Great. So, checking back in, so we've talked about the profits, we've talked about the costs. So if we combine those together and we sort of look at the annual net income, what you'll see is, we have this kind of big chunk of red here in the first 5 years where we're spending those $2 million a year in upfront CapEx. Then kind of this middle tier here in years 6 through 10, where we're running a profit, but we're still, we're not paying those upfront costs anymore. We're kind of running a small profit. But then in year 10, it's not till year 10 that due on sale mortgages starts being paid back. And we really see the net income start increasing in a really significant way. And so when we talked earlier about that sort of $10.4 million fund size that we need, really the goal of that is to basically offset that big chunk of red that you see in those first 5 years, to make sure that this fund doesn't go negative, that it has the money to meet its obligations over the course of this program. That's kind of the level that we need based on all of our other assumptions to make sure that this program stays in the black throughout and can kind of maximize those dollars spent.
And I just want to jump in and add something to what you said on that slide. I want to reiterate that we are, doing this operating model and this financial model to help figure out how Finance New Orleans can scale their vision, right? So this is based on that goal of 1,500 mortgages. It might not look like this in year one because Finance New Orleans is growing those revenues, and we're looking at additional sources for that 10.4 million, just to give folks a sense of what you see in 2021 might not be what happens in 2021, but we're thinking about the pace and scale that Finance New Orleans wants to work at, and what will it take, what are the sources and what does the revenue growth look like to get us there.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. That's a really good point. And so then the last kind of sort of piece in terms of our model is looking at some of the impacts. So again, here we've just focused on water, gallons of stormwater diverted and cumulative metric tons of CO2 reduced. We're also, as Damon mentioned earlier, going to be exploring things like number of jobs supported, green jobs specifically. But again, what you see here is this kind of cumulative impact that continues to grow over time. And so it's not just a straight line. The rate of impact increases as time goes on. So the more green mortgages there are, as you're building and increasing that stock every single year, the impact grows exponentially, really starts to become a more exponential growth. And so, we see some really significant benefits here that are really important to the city, as well as, to the homeowner, benefits to the homeowners as well. So looking forward a little bit, we're thinking about what additional future revenue sources might look like. And this could be a few things. So it could be, leveraging those pilot fees to issue bonds. It could be, leaning on the city for general obligation bonds, or figuring out a way to do outcomes payments with the city or other stakeholders who might be engaged. We're exploring the possibility of a clean energy services fee through Entergy, as well as potential revenue sharing with some of our partners. So again, none of these revenue sources are included in our current model. They're not finalized, but they sort of present a range of future opportunities that we're going to have to continue to grow this program. I think one of the other things that's going to be important as well is, as this program gets stood up and we start seeing folks participate, it starts building that portfolio, it becomes a little bit easier to start leveraging that success and leveraging that experience into some of these other areas, and kind of going to these other stakeholders and being able to kind of show the evidence of what we've been doing, what we're learning from what we've been learning in the process, how we can improve it, how we can bring in additional sources of capital, et cetera. And so then the very last piece, the very last slide we have here is just thinking through the future. So what's 2021 going to look like? So again, this year has really been focused on that single family housing green mortgage program. But when we look ahead to 2021, we really want to be focused on the multifamily housing, on commercial buildings in particular, And this can, take a few shapes. So part of it will be kind of exploring a green bond model for multifamily housing. We're also hoping to do demo projects for green buildings, for housing innovation, trying to explore the possibility of doing on-bill financing, or exploring sales tax exemptions, et cetera. So we kind of have a variety of objectives for 2021 as well that we're hoping to work on. And again, this is all to be done in conjunction with FNO, with Kane Mitter, and with the other partners as well. But again, as excited as we are about the Green Mortgage Program and how that's been the focus for today's conversation, the work doesn't end there. We really want to make sure we're kind of helping FNO with that whole holistic approach, and being able to kind of engage on all of these priorities moving forward. Great. So I know I went a few minutes over, but I'll pause there and we can, if there are any other questions or kind of discussion comments, otherwise we can turn it back over to Damon. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate you all taking the time. And again, if I know Damon has our contact information, so if any other questions come up, later on, you have an epiphany in the shower or something, feel free to reach out. I'm sure we're happy to talk anytime.
Thank you, Matt and Laura. Awesome. And Ben, I know you're in the background. Thank y'all.
Yep, thanks.
So to the board, just to catch you up on time, we still have some board action items that need to be taken care of. But as it relates to the retreat agenda, the only 2 items remaining are new initiatives, and that should be section 7 or 8 on your agendas. But just really quickly, I mentioned the American Green Bank Consortium already. We've been invited into that group. So we've been getting resources, having an opportunity to participate on a peer-to-peer basis. That organization is sponsoring some legislation that would, specifically the National Climate Bank legislation, which would provide a consistent stream of funding to green banks or green finance authorities like ours. So we've been sending in information for the federal level decision makers to help make the case that we need funding for green mortgages. We specifically submitted information about green mortgages. Other agencies are talking about different levels of investment, which we just haven't gotten to yet. But it does help that there's a network of agencies presenting opportunities to the federal government and expressing where the needs are. So we'll continue working on that particular initiative. We were also invited into an initiative by the Lincoln Land Institute called the Accelerating Community Investment. And that is a program specifically for housing finance agencies, not so much green agencies, but HFAs in general at the state and local level. And the intent there is to provide collaboration opportunities among state agencies, state and local agencies, so that we can carve out a new path for how these agencies need to be funded moving ahead. We talked about the change in the marketplace with green finance authorities. Well, housing finance agencies overall are trying to adapt. Not all are going to do the same thing that we decided to do, but I suspect that many will. So we'll be a part of this collaboration, and it will also give us access to community investors and CDFIs who can help us accelerate our financing needs. You heard Mr. Badger talk about the $1 billion in community impact that we'd like to see over the next 10 years. Not all of that money is going to come directly off of our balance sheet or come from bonds. We're going to have to get creative with going out and getting funding from third parties like foundations, commercial banks, traditional bond investors, and non-traditional bond investors, and even the federal government through new legislation for the National Climate Bank. So we're working on all these different angles, and the money that we're talking about we need for these programs, we know we don't have all of that money on our balance sheet. That's just a fact. But we still have to evaluate what is needed, what will it take for us to get to our optimal performance, and how much will that cost? And those are the numbers that we're presenting you with, but we're also presenting those numbers to the marketplace to let them know that we need help getting to our goals. So with that, Michelle, that concludes the retreat portion of the agenda today. Do you have any other comments or questions about, about the way the retreat is going, or anything we're going to do moving ahead?
Sorry. I don't, Damon. We will continue the dialogue for the board members. The staff will continue the dialogue and putting more meat on the bones for the plan. And as was stated earlier, there will be an additional presentation or information shared during the budget process. And it is our objective to have the 10-year plan complete by the end of next month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. It's been great presentations. I do have some follow-up questions, but I can ask those as we go on in the process before we complete the 10-year plan. So thank you all.
Thank you. Damon, if you don't need me, are you guys getting ready to get to your board agenda?
Yeah, that's it for the retreat portion. So we'll follow up with you later. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Quantified Ventures team. We appreciate you.
All right, thanks all.
All right. So council had to step away for a moment, but she'll be right back. In the meantime, we do have a quorum now with all of our board members. So Chairman Smith, I think we just need to make note that there is a quorum present so that we can continue forward with the rest of the board agenda.
That being the case, that there is a quorum present, I suggest that we convene the board meeting.
Thank you. Give me one moment. I am pulling up the rest of the agenda.
Oh, come on.
I'm just switching screens back and forth.
It's all good.
When y'all doing roll, I'm here.
Okay, yeah,
we saw when you arrived, man.
Man, I'm trying to announce myself, man. Leave me alone, brother.
We're gonna do a roll call, man. You're gonna get a chance.
No, I'm just letting you know because I'm out and about. I ain't want you to miss me and ain't think I was here if I didn't respond.
Okay, so what we've done with the board agenda, since we consolidated our committee meetings into one meeting, there's still some business that needs to be handled at the committee level. So first off, we have the program committees. Elizabeth, please put the agenda on the screen so the board can see it. But we have the committee program committee agenda. First off, the meetings need to be approved. The meeting minutes from last month need to be approved, but we also have a project that was supposed to be presented to you during the October meeting, but of course that meeting was postponed. Now this particular project, as we get into it, we did have it on a particular timeline for closing by the end of the year. And it's something that we've been working with the city on, but we were just simply thrown off the schedule with Hurricane Zeta. So we can get into the specifics of it, but first off, we need to take an action item for the approval of the September 22nd program committee meeting minutes. So Chair Smith, I think that, since we have a full quorum, you may have to just take the approval from the programs chair.
Yeah, that's fine, because I'm not on either of the programs committee, so whoever the chair is can go ahead with that.
And that will be Giselle for programs.
Is Giselle back? I know she had stepped out for a minute.
Now it doesn't look like she's back. So we can actually come back to the minutes, but, oh, there she is right there.
I'm back. Of the minutes.
We lost.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we lost you for a moment. What did you say, Giselle?
Okay. Do we need approval of the minutes, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm on my phone, y'all.
You need to get better service.
Hello. I'm sorry. Yeah, I do. I'm sorry. I'm on my phone, so I do apologize. I need to move approval of the minutes. Is that what we're
Right, from your
of the programs?
Yeah, and you have Andronika
Yeah.
and Mr. Chase on the phone. So they
Oh,
could
perfect.
give you a second.
Okay. Thank you. I move approval of the September 22nd Programs Committee meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, respond and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes are approved. Thank you.
Thank you. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's it. Okay. Thank you.
And then for the sake of time, we did submit the programs update package to you for your review. So you have that information. Giselle, unless you want us to go through it specifically at this moment, we can jump to the Peace Lake Towers project, which is where most of our time is needed. This is a project that is seeking approval from us, but I'll take direction from the board right now on how you want to handle the next two items.
I recommend to the chair that we just move ahead with the project overview. And if he has no objections, we can go ahead and move forward with that review, Damon.
I have no objection based on the recommendation of the program chair.
Okay, Elizabeth, please place the Peace Lake Towers analysis on the screen, everyone's view. And while she's finding it, so the Peace Lake Towers project is a multifamily project that was presented to Finance New Orleans. It's a project that the city of New Orleans has been investing in or has invested in and has put on their high priority list because there are many current tenants being affected in that property. It's in need of repair, and the developer that they've been working with, they feel confident will be able to come in and provide those upgrades to that project to create more community impact. So this particular project, we've underwritten and evaluated. Mr. Badger and Ms. Brown have both of their departments have played a role in analyzing this project as we've done on the two previous projects. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Ms. Brown to talk about some of the specifics of this deal and Mr. Badger to chime in as well. But once we get to the end, which we're going to be seeking, we are seeking preliminary approval of this project so that we can move it forward. There are some timeline considerations at play with this particular project, but we can talk about those at the end. So Ms. Brown, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the development analysis on this project.
Yeah, thank you. So, just to echo Damon, we've done our due diligence through the underwriting committee meeting. Peace Lake Towers located at 925 Chefman Tour Highway. This project is basically a 131 unit affordable elderly apartment community, basically in Orleans Parish, 6-story high rise. Will consist of 131 bedroom units, 1 2-bedroom units. And basically the project kind of just outlines, you'll see in the development description, all the parts of the east, the affordable housing ownership, the affordable housing, it'll cover financial budgeting. In respect to that, it said management and new ownership collaborate with agencies to provide services such as financial budgeting seminars, job training, preventive healthcare programs, information and senior counseling, neighborhood watch programs, community gardens, as well as social and recreational programs. The review of due diligence in the development budget, it says the total development cost for the developer is $26,814,396. Per unit cost $204,690. Acquisition came in at $11,500,000. Hard cost running at $8,313,748. Soft cost totaling $5,500,648, and a developer fee of $1.5 million. As it relates to financing, debt sources totaling $14.5 million, equity sources $12,314,395. The developer has several funding commitments already in place. It will create 50 temporary jobs. As it relates to the disadvantaged business enterprise, the DBE participation is projected at 25 to 30%. Moving on to page 2, the pro forma, the development will contain 131 units. We've kind of went through that 1-bedroom unit at $1,019 per month, which factors at about $1,589,640 in gross rental potential annually. 1 2-bedroom unit at $775 per month, which factors at about $9,300 in gross rental potentially annually. The vacancy loss is estimated at 7%, totaling about $111,926. Operating expenses are estimated at $636,970 annually, which includes a 3% inflation rate. The development has a net operating income NOI in year 1 of $834,720. After analyzing the financial economic review of the project, the underwriting committee recommends that this project move forward to the Board of Trustees Program Committee for preliminary approval. Mr. Badger and his team worked hard on the underwriting, so I'll let him speak to specific highlights as it relates to the underwriting process. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bianca. And I think you pretty much covered, most of the items from a financial feasibility standpoint. Just to reiterate some of the highlights from as it relates to the feasibility report. There was enough reserves to cover the debt service. As Bianca mentioned, there's equity commitments already in place. The developer has extensive experience and in review of the guarantors' financials. They're very strong. The debt service coverage begins at 1.5 and improves over the life cycle. And as also mentioned, the projected NOI of 835 in year 1 improves over the life cycle as well. So therefore, we move to recommend this to move forward for preliminary approval. And that's all I have from my end.
Thank you all for that update. To the board, do you have any questions about this particular project? And before you do ask your questions, just to give you an update on process, this project was supposed to go to the programs committee in October. We did send the information to you in advance of the board meeting, but we did not have the board meeting. So we were always seeking preliminary approval for this project in November. But as a matter of process, the programs committee is supposed to recommend to the board any project for full approval, and then the board provides their preliminary approval based on a recommendation of the programs committee. So, since we're already in board, I believe proper protocol, Chair Smith, is that we again defer to the chair of the programs committee, Mrs. Johnson Banks, and any of the program committee members for their recommendations on how they'd like to move forward with this particular project and whether or not we should seek preliminary approval from the board.
Ms. Banks?
I have not, thank you for the updates. I have not fully read through everything. So if my programs committee has any questions, please go ahead and ask them. Right now, the only question I have would be, what would be our cash or obligation for this proposed project? And how do we stand with the other projects and our cash flow?
So the pilot projects that you've been asked to approve thus far are just that, they're only pilot projects. So pilots don't require any cash output from us, but we do earn an upfront fee and an ongoing fee from every pilot that we approve on behalf of the city. So for the first couple of projects, we're waiting on them to close this December. And this project that we're talking about today is very similar to those projects in that they're only getting a pilot from us, and that they're seeking to close in December as well. But there's no cash outlay from us for pilots. Now, when we
there's no cash. I know there's no upfront cash. There's no no cash outlay at all.
No.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Now these pilot arrangements do show up on our balance sheet, and Mr. Badge is working with the auditor to figure out how we fully express those financially. But at the end of the day, these are powers that are enacted once a property is off the tax rolls and in our name. So we don't necessarily have to put up any cash in order to execute that model.
Got it. So thank you for that clarification. I know I probably ask that every project. I always ask the same question because I know that's a ongoing concern. So just make sure that we are, kind of restating that until we kind of get used to doing these projects. So thank you again for that clarification. I don't have any concerns. Any of the board members, committee members, sorry.
And Mrs. Johnson Banks, let me just say this: this project is only getting preliminary approval, so there's still some due diligence.
Yes.
Needs to happen with our council, their council. So, it does check the boxes from what we've discussed in terms of protocol and the types of projects that we'd like to see.
Right.
It does meet that criteria, but you do have, if you're not 100% comfortable just yet, you do have an additional few weeks before this project will go to final approval so that we can sign off on any questions that you may
have. Thank you. Yes, I don't have any concerns right now, so I will recommend our preliminary approval of this project to the committee. My committee, like, this is weird. We're in board meeting, but it's a committee recommendation. So am I recommending to the full board preliminary approval of this?
Yes.
So I recommend preliminary approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Chase. All those in favor, respond by saying aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposition? Hearing none, the programs committee recommends our preliminary approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, program committee. So, Mr. Smith, we do have, and Elizabeth, please put the agenda back on the screen so the board can see it. But Chair Smith, we do have a few other items that need to be taken care of. And I believe we still have to come back with full board approval or board approval for preliminary acceptance of this project. So that will be at the end. But in the meantime, we still have the finance committee agenda. Now, the chair of the finance committee isn't present today. Wade Wooten wasn't able to join this meeting. He let us know ahead of time. So we have the action item, the only action item or the minutes. We do have a financial status report, which we're obligated to provide every month. So I suggest that we could hold off on the minutes until next month, once the chair is back. And Mr. Badger can give the financial status report. Do you have any objections to that, Mr. Smith, or any other board members?
No, I do not.
All right, so Mr. Badger can go through the financial status report and we'll defer the approval of the minutes to the December meeting.
Great, thanks, Damon. Elizabeth, can you advance to the first page of the financial status report, please? All right, there you go. Actually, that is August. Okay, is September there as well? Okay, great. There we go. Okay, so this is the financial status report. This is year to date as of September. And looking at our year to date revenues, overall, we're at 145,000 to a budget of 156,000. On the expense side, the actual expenses year to date are 1 million to a budget of 1.4. There's a favorability of 362,000 there, which has pretty much been the story all year. Next page, the revenue breakdown. The shortfall is driven primarily by the multifamily program income line. Same story here, but we have started to see some revenue from the applications that's coming in from the pilots that we have. So you'll see that you see that number there has been generated, which we haven't seen all year. So that's a step in the right direction. Next page, expense analysis. Ideally, mainly favorable, as mentioned. You can advance to the next page. This provides kind of a look back analysis on our revenues and expenses historically throughout the year. You see we trending within our average ranges in revenues and expenses. Next page, please. This takes a look at our Pathways portfolio. Revenues year to date are 30,000, expenses year to date 33,000. We'll see, as Damon mentioned earlier, we sold our last property, so we received revenues from that this particular month. I think it was November, maybe the end of October, but we'll see some revenue there before the end of the year. Next page. This is a look at our balance sheet comparison year over year. No major changes here in terms of stability and overall composition. And then next page. And then finally, we have our summary of cash and cash equivalents. Year to date as of September, we're at 10.8. That's slightly lower than the prior month, roughly as a result of our net income, which is roughly 100,000. And that's what I have for the financial status report. Any questions, comments? All right, thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Badger. If there are no questions, we'll keep moving on. The next thing on the agenda, we're now moving into the board component of the agenda, and we need to get approval of last month's, of the last meeting. Minutes that we had was back in September. So we need approval of those board meeting minutes. And that's for you, Mr. Smith. Chair Smith, are you there?
I am.
So the next thing is we just need approval of the meeting minutes.
I move approval of the meeting minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Banks? Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Sounds like that was an aye for Mr. Thomas.
It was an aye.
It was.
Did we lose Giselle?
I think we may have lost her, but you still have a quorum online,
Right.
so we can keep moving forward if the rest of the members agree.
Do we need, well, I guess we had, me and Mr. Chase moved approval. Hunter and Andronika approved. So I guess that passes the approval of the minutes.
Yes, thank you. So the next item on the agenda, item CB, preliminary approval of the Peace Lake Towers project. This is the project that we just discussed under the Programs Committee agenda. And this particular project needs preliminary approval this month because it's also seeking final approval in December. And between now and December, council will work with their council to finalize the documents to make sure everything is in place to ensure that this is in fact the type of investment that we'd like to make for the city, for the organization, and just to check all of the boxes. So this only gives us the ability to move ahead in the process, but we would still need to come back to you in December for a final approval of this project.
So all in favor of the approval of the project? Well, I guess I move for approval of the project.
And I'm sorry.
Second.
I'm sorry, board members, just so you know, there is a resolution provided by council in your board packets. So it's a preliminary approval with the standard resolution that we'll use for all bond and pilot projects moving ahead, but it's also provided in your packages, and that's what you're actually signing off on.
And that's for the project that we're moving for approval on right now.
That's right. It's just for that.
Peace Lake Towers.
What page is that in the
That should be.
The resolution was emailed separately this morning.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
I'll have that.
Elizabeth, please put it on the screen for the board members to see it directly. So I'll read the intro just so everyone has clarity. It states November 17, 2020 resolution, a resolution giving preliminary approval and authorization to proceed with the development of an in lieu of tax plan in connection with the construction and redevelopment of an affordable elderly designated apartment community located in the Reed Boulevard West neighborhood of Orleans Parish, located at 925 Chef Mentor Highway, New Orleans, Louisiana, for Millennia Housing Development and providing for other matters with respect to the foregoing. And then it goes on to state who we are as an organization, goes on to talk about our ability to create pilots. And it also talks about our abilities as a public trust to engage in these types of transactions on behalf of the city of New Orleans. Keep scrolling down, Elizabeth, please. Yep, next page. And then this also talks about our arrangement with the city council and them providing specific powers or empowering us, Finance New Orleans, to issue these pilots. And that was given to us December 19th of last year and then made official this May when we signed that LAC. So that's what this section speaks to. And then this next section speaks specifically to the actual project. Some details that we just went through in the analysis component of the discussion. And then lastly, it states that this board has agreed, or this board agrees that this project will provide some sort of public benefit and health and safety to the citizens as stated in our mission and as a part of our arrangement with the city of New Orleans and other cooperative agencies. So this again just gives us preliminary approval to move this project forward. Then the remaining sections have specific information, which will be standard for all of these projects, that protects our interest, but also clearly communicates to the developer what's going to happen now and moving forward with this project. And so for preliminary approval, we will have to do roll call, Chair Smith, for all present board members, just to get whether or not they vote yay, nay, or if they're going to abstain from this particular project.
Okay. Am I doing the roll call or is somebody else doing it?
Oh, Elizabeth's going to do the roll call.
Stephen M. Smith, Chairman.
Yay.
Giselle Johnson Banks, Vice Chairman.
Yay.
G. Wade Wooten, Secretary Treasurer.
Absent.
Charles Brown, Member.
Absent.
Edgar Chase IV, Member.
Yay.
Andronika Morris, Member.
Yay.
And Hunter Thomas, Member.
Yes.
All right, so based on those votes, we have preliminary approval for the project. We will again perform all necessary due diligence before we seek final approval on this project. The developer and the city have asked us to work with them around their closing date in December. And just so the board knows, many of these projects have very sensitive timelines, or they have sensitive closing dates. So once a commitment is made from a lender, or a tax credit investor, typically that has a certain expiration date on it. And in many cases, the developers will come to us, or in all cases, we ask them when they need to close and do they have any sensitive closing requirements. And when they do tell us that they have sensitive closing requirements, we try to accommodate them as much as we can, but we also want to stay true to a process. So we want everybody to have the same experience with us. But in the event where it's a project that's important to the community and the city has identified it as a high priority for various reasons, then we try to follow suit. And this project is one of those cases. So they've asked for final approval a week ahead of when our final board meeting of the year takes place. Our final board meeting of the year takes place the third Tuesday of the month, which I believe is the 15th, December 15th. Am I wrong, anyone? I think that's December 15th.
Correct.
Right. So December 15th is when we're scheduled to meet now, but this developer has asked for an accommodation to provide final approval by the second week of December. And again, that's strictly up to the board how you want to handle it. But we're requesting that the board consider having its final meeting of the month, perhaps late the second week of December, and that will allow us to complete our agenda for the rest of the year. We still have to host a public meeting for this project. The public is entitled to a public hearing for any project that we, that comes across our agenda or that we approve or invest in. So we still have to do that part of the process, but the final step would be, since you've given a preliminary approval, is deciding when you want to meet in December and whether or not we can do anything to accommodate this project.
So will that meeting in December be predicated upon you getting some more stuff done, or can we schedule that now?
No, we can schedule it now. We'll have everything necessary by that meeting, but it'd be good if we could just decide on it now, if the board is comfortable with doing that.
I guess we just need to figure out what the available dates are, and then we can kind of shoot it around with the members that are present.
So the week ahead, I can just tell you right now, the week ahead is begins with December 7th and ends one more. It ends December 12th. So to give ourselves enough time to handle our due diligence needs and to be ready for this month's board meeting. Friday, December 12th is a day that we could meet. That would be 2 days ahead of when we're normally scheduled to meet. But I also think that
December 12th is a Saturday.
I'm sorry, December 11th. I apologize. So December 11th is a few days ahead of when we would normally meet, which is the 15th. But it would give us enough time to get everything we need done. And it would also accommodate the timeline that the city has identified and its developer as well.
I can't do December 11th. I know I have to be deposed on that date.
Okay. What about the 10th?
The 10th is fine for me.
How about the rest of the board? Does the 10th work for you?
I'm good on the 10th.
And we
Wait, I'm trying to get my schedule open. I got the onboard open and and the Zoom open on my phone. Let's see, the 10th.
Yes.
And what time we're talking?
It would be our normal meeting time, 2 to 5.
Okay, yeah, I can make that work.
And we will resume committee meetings next month, so it wouldn't be a full 2 to 5 board meeting.
Right. Yeah. If we can get it on the invite put on our calendars as soon as possible, so I don't give it away.
All right, we'll do that today. and council is back on. Jay, we're talking about the timing of the Peace Lake Towers project. We received preliminary approval, just so you understand procedure that we went through. We have the committee agendas on the agenda today. So the committee members from at least the programs committee did recommend within this meeting final approval or preliminary approval of the Peace Lakes project. The full board just gave preliminary approval based on that recommendation. So now that we have preliminary approval, it's been communicated to the board that the city and the developer have requested that we accommodate the timeline. There's a sensitive closing date for this developer in December. So the board is now agreeing to meet on December 10th so that we can finalize our business for the rest of the year by that date and deliver that whatever we need to the developer. So is there anything that I missed, anything that needs to be communicated to the board to make them comfortable via the resolution that they just approved?
Yeah, no, so nothing different than any other. The preliminary resolution that you just adopted is very much similar to the other two previous preliminary approvals that you guys have provided for the two previous projects, being the McDonough 19 project, as well as the Chef Mentor Apartments project. So same process. We'll continue to use this process going forward for all of the projects. What that is an indicator of the preliminary approval, the fact that it has reached you is an indicator that the underwriting committee has received the application and all of the requirements. You know, Damon's team, including Byron and Bianca, have reviewed it, have vetted it, have done that preliminary analysis, which shows that, you know, the project is feasible and it is worthy of, you know, meets all of the criteria and worthy of a pilot. And so what happens between now and the next approval, the final approval, number one, legal will finalize all of the legal documents and present those with a resolution for final approval should it, you know, reach that level. We expect that this one will, but again, we've got to go through the process. And so Byron and Bianca and Damon will continue to work with the developer and their team to ensure that everything is in line and meets the standard. And then we will move to that final approval at that special meeting that you guys are scheduling now. And we'll have the draft of the lease agreement there for your consideration, which will include the actual pilot, the proposed pilot structure. And so that's the process in a nutshell.
So Chair Smith, any other questions from you or the board?
Not for me. Board members? Hearing no questions, I suggest we move toward approval.
Well, you've given the.
We already gave the preliminary approval.
Gave the preliminary approval, so that was just clarification, so we can move ahead on the agenda.
Okay.
So we're almost there, y'all. Know it's been a long meeting. Thank y'all for your patience. This is a lot of important information being thrown at you today, so we're almost done. We only have two items left. The first is the office lease renewal. So we're currently housed at the 201 St. Charles building, suite 4444. We've been here for a year and a half now. As you know, we also leased out our home office on Barone to a local contractor who's doing a project in the area. They're not quite done with that project yet. We expect them to wrap up within the first quarter or second quarter of next year on that project. Once they're finished with that project, they'll move out. And at that point, we'll be able to start renovating our home building for our needs. Now that we're in a post-COVID environment, we think the use of that space is back in play for us. We were a little unsure about how we would use our office space moving ahead, but I actually think COVID has brought some clarity to how we need to work as an organization, given the fact that social distancing is part of our future. It's not going anywhere. So many businesses and governments are making the adjustment in terms of how to best utilize office space to maximize productivity in these times where virtual is just going to be a part of who we are and what we do. And we also need to make sure that we have all we need technologically and resource-wise in order to operate in that manner. So in the meantime, we still need a place to be. The office lease, our current office lease is up, so we need an extension. So the proposal in front of you that's provided in your board packages is an office lease extension for 18 months. Council has reviewed the extension, and this will give us enough time and space to stay where we are and also begin planning to re-enter the Barone Street property. So we're not going to wait until the end of our tenant moving out before we start planning. We're going to begin that planning process at the beginning of the year. We already started doing some homework on it, but we need to revisit it so that we can figure out precisely what we want to do with our existing space. But this lease extension will give us 18 months to figure it out. And at the end of that 18-month or so time frame, we'd like to be in the process of moving back into our home building. So Byron, Bianca, do y'all have anything to add? Did I miss anything? And Jade, can you just talk about your evaluation of the lease from a legal perspective?
Yeah, so and you're talking about the Barone lease right now, right?
Well, I'm talking about the renewal
of the lease that you're in. Okay. Because Bianca and I have also been talking about the Barone lease too. So this lease is a standard lease. The lease for the St. Charles office is a standard lease. There are no red flags there, very similar to the lease that we signed previously. Byron and Damon and Bianca will have to ensure that it lines up from a financial perspective, but from a legal perspective, it's fine. On the other Barone location, Bianca and I have just been having conversations around ensuring that all of the, we had talked about some improvements to that particular piece of property, and ensuring that we are having conversations with the tenant to make sure that those get done in accordance to what we agreed to. So those are the two lease scenarios. But I think from a legal standpoint, we're good.
Any questions from the board on either one of the office leases?
Hearing no questions, I suggest we move on.
Well, we actually need approval of the renewal because it is over the threshold for the client amount. So the board has to provide approval of this item.
I move approval of the lease extension or renewal. Hello.
I think I seconded.
I second. Oh.
Okay.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hearing no opposition, the board moves approval. Moves to approve.
Thank you. And the final item on the agenda for this evening is the proposed budget 2021 draft budget review. So normally, again, you would get this information in October. We would begin to give it to you in October, but we did not have our October meeting. So we are coming to you now with a proposed draft budget. Mr. Badger has worked with myself and Ms. Brown to figure out what we need next year. We've talked to our consultants, and this budget that you'll see in a few moments, or that maybe you've already looked at it, the methodology behind it is that we as an organization need to continue making that investment in ourselves in order to reach these goals, these high lofty goals that we've set. We've looked at an aggressive scenario of what it will take for us to reach those goals. And that's what we've put into this budget. So you will notice that this budget is a little higher than it has been or than it was last year, which was an increase from the year before. But a few things to keep in mind: we're not going to spend all of the money allotted in the budget this year, and then also we're going out to third parties to help us fund this aggressive budget because this is what we think we need. These are the conversations that we're having with the marketplace. We know that we need a certain number of resources to deliver to the community, so we took the task of finding out all of the detail around what should be in the budget and what shouldn't. And so Mr. Badger will present to you the results of that analysis. Keep in mind, this is preliminary. We are still fine tuning the plan for next year, but we wanted to give ourselves enough room in order to have the conversation. And the budget that we're planning to run next year is a budget that we think we can maintain for a 5 to 7 year period. We're going to make better use of our third-party consultants moving ahead. The staff is going to be more focused on those core service areas that we talked about in the strategic plan. So this budget reflects that. Our focus is on the core service areas, provide more value, delivering faster to the community, and we're going to depend upon our third-party consultants to help us out where we need them. Just like the consultants that you heard from earlier, but we have other consultants on the marketing side, the IT side, the HR side, that all help us keep things running in a smooth fashion at Finance New Orleans. So this budget is built with that methodology. So we think we can operate in a stealth manner over the next few years, but there is a point of that we need to get to in order to be optimal. So don't think that all this money is going to come from our balance sheet, because I know we don't have it all. But the plan is for us to go out and get it. We just certainly had to identify exactly what it is we need. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Badger so that he can walk us through this proposed budget, which will have to get final approval in December. So there is some time to work on this, and there is time to get your feedback on what feels good to you and what doesn't.
Great, thanks, Damon, and thanks for laying out that framework there. Elizabeth, if you could advance to the third page. This first page kind of gives an overview of the process, and I think Damon kind of highlighted those areas. The second page kind of gives overall highlights, but we'll go to the actual numbers and look at that. But ideally, the executive team did meet, and we met in a series of planning meetings. We also met with staff, with several consultants, with our partners. Each session was designed to analyze our performance with our strategic plan, look at market trends, look at the findings from our research and development exercises, and we use this as a way to develop the proposed budget for the upcoming year. So I've projected out a forecasted actual for 2020. Right now, and this is nothing new. We've been communicating this through the financial status reports monthly, but there's favorability from the actual to the budget for 2020. That's roughly $350,000 of that $2 million budget we had last year. The proposed budget we would like to present today, and there's no, as Damon mentioned, no action needed today, but it will be recommended for adoption in December, is a $2.7 million budget for 2021. The budget consists of $402,000 of budget revenues with a $2.3 million infusion of our reserves. The other piece of that, the components of that revenue is single family revenue, $42,000, and issuer fees. Multifamily, which is the bulk of it, $290,000, which would be generated from a target of 10 pilot and mandatory inclusionary zoning transactions. There's investment income. We have budgeted $32,000, which is interest income. And then other income is from the lease income from 618 Rowan Street. It's lower there because the lease is 6 months versus the 12 months from last year. So overall proposed revenue budget is 193,000 higher than the prior year. On the expense side, total expenses are 715,000 higher from the prior year's budget. The primary driver here is salaries and benefits, which is budgeted at 1.6, and that's to add some additional FTEs to support our initiatives and our strategic plan. We budgeted for 12 FTEs in 2020. We're looking to add 8 additional FTEs in 2021. Another driver on the expense side is the general operating and building expense line. That's 81,000 higher than prior year's budget. And that is to support or continue supporting the community support fund. The remaining allocation there, we've spent roughly 30,000. There's another, there's 70,000 still remaining. And then there's 11,000 for the lease renewal. Next line item is the consultant and professional services line. We have, this is increased by 60,000. And as Damon just mentioned, we're flushing out our consultant needs, but this 60,000 is primarily related to human resources, getting some consultant identification there, recruitment, and also a consultant to support our multifamily program. And then last, we have technology services. It's higher by 75,000. And this is to support our technology infrastructure, which could include the implementation of a data management solution or file sharing solution, equipment refresh, which is something with the short life cycle of technology. We should be doing on a 3 to 4 year basis. Network security services, which is important, and then just ongoing future technology enhancement and needs. One being our single family and multifamily solution program, which I know, or application, which I know is roughly 40,000 annually. And also some network and mapping tools and a few other things. But as mentioned, we're still flushing out some of these consultant and technology services expenses, but essentially this is a first proposal, a first pass for your review that we feel will help us implement and deliver on our operational activities and our strategic plan for next year. Any questions, comments?
Do we have any idea what the proposed income infusions are, other than what's listed on here from single family, multifamily, and investment income?
So we are still, and I quantify, kind of covered some of that in the presentation. We're looking at various infusions, one being possibly from the GO bond from the city. We're looking at possible grants. There's program related investments, which are grants that have sub or favorable interest rates attached to them, as well as some equity equivalent loans that are stretched out over a long period of time, and they have lower rates as well. So that's kind of the target, and we're identifying some other potential revenue sources. We want to leverage our pilot revenues as well. So as time goes on, we'll start to see that pilot revenue kind of add on as we get those annual fees coming in. But those are some of the components we're looking at to bring in. But this is strictly just the, presenting the operational budget. We still have those other funds, that on a larger scale.
Yeah, and to add to that, Chair Smith, we have, our first 2 projects are going to close this year in December, as I just mentioned. I know we're scheduled to close at least one, and if this project you saw today gets final approval in December, then we'll close that one as well. And there's a third one that I believe is either going to close in December or at the beginning of the new year. So Each of those transactions is going to bring in revenue to us that we just haven't seen in the past. So the way our pilots are structured, there's an upfront fee that's based on a percentage of the project, and then there's an ongoing fee that's based on tax history. And we came up with a formula to charge each developer, a certain rate. So as that pipeline grows and compounds on itself, then our pilot revenue will grow. It's in there for 40 years. But the reality of that program is that it's going to take a little while to break even because the pilot revenues actually grow incrementally over time. There's a rate of growth tied to each one of our contracts. So the amount of dollars that we're collecting today, they should grow at 2.5% every year for almost 40 years or for the entire 40-year period. So we expect a very steep increase in what we collect as we add more pilot projects to the portfolio. That does not include the income we will receive from investing or from issuing bonds. That is another revenue stream. And we conservatively did not include that, even though we know we have a few bond projects lined up for next year. So we're still fine tuning what the revenues will be for all of these new program investments. The money will start coming in December. And as we roll out the housing programs, we're also looking at the green buildings and infrastructure programs, which we expect to actually have better margins from a financial perspective. Those programs tend to have better margins and will allow us to generate other types of revenue moving ahead. So we're trying to get to revenue generation as quickly as possible, but there will be a build-up time. So in the meantime, what do we do? And that's the story we've been telling to investors that Byron just mentioned. We're telling investors that we do have revenue that is going to start coming in the door. We do expect some growth. We do expect to be able to scale a lot of these programs, especially as we figure them out moving ahead. Then we do think our revenue profile is such that it warrants an upfront investment. And that's the conversation that's going on right now. It has been positive. We don't have any firm commitments just yet, but I mentioned earlier in that presentation, going out towards April, we're going to start making some formal asks and start communicating to the market that we're going out for bond issues, for program-related investments, or just other types of patient capital injections that we need, like from local banks, that we need in order to scale this master plan. Does the board have any other ideas, questions, or comments about the budget?
This is Giselle, Damon. So we're gonna get another look at this before we have to approve it, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I have some thoughts, and I'm just being informed on another call. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of juggling right now. About the state of COVID in New Orleans now. Mm-hmm. So I want us to look at some different options possibly for approval of a budget. It may not be a full budget, or maybe a budget maybe forecasting through the first half of next year and then come back to the board with a revised budget. I just have some concerns, and we can talk about this, between now and the December board meeting, but just some thoughts I have for how we move forward with the budget. It made me thinking about some creative or different ways to present the budget that may look different from what it used to look like in the past.
Okay.
In terms of how we approve it, coming back for revisions, I think it's prudent for us right now in this environment to really look at our options in terms of presenting and approving the budget.
Understood. And we did have a conversation about, how we move this forward, because we obviously wouldn't just come out of the gate spending this type of money. That's something we would build up to. So we don't have all of those resources on hand today. And we would only get them if we had the capital coming in, or if we saw that the revenue pipeline was building up faster than anticipated. But we do expect, as you said, that we rethink our process.
Yeah.
And figure out a way to go back and forth so that the board is always up to speed on where we are, what money's coming in the door, and what the expectations are. So you'll feel comfortable making this type of investment if necessary.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that, Daniel.
Anything else from the board before we turn it back over to Chair Smith to close the meeting? So we'll definitely provide more drafts as we get information. We normally host a meeting with the Finance Committee Chair between the proposed budget and the final budget approval. And then we also just reach out to board members one-on-one to see if you have any questions or concerns. So we will continue that process between now and the next board meeting, which we've agreed to do December 10th. And if you have any other questions in the meantime, you can always email us and we'll address them right away. But we're going to get back to the drawing board and doing our homework just to make sure we can give you a refined understanding of everything that's included in that budget and at the schedule at which we expect to make those expenditures.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, I move that the meeting be adjourned.
Thank you, board. We appreciate it. We'll see you.
Thank you. Bye. Y'all stay safe. Put your mask on.
All right. Thank y'all.
Doing facility inspections.